Welcome to the Shameless Promo podcast. I'm Quinn Ford, an introverted entrepreneur who used to shrink away from selling, and now I teach women how to sell for a living. Each week, you will find episodes that will help you grow your confidence in showing what you have to offer so that you can grow the business of your dreams. People need to hear what you have to say. You have to promote yourself shamelessly. Let's get into it. Hey. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to invite you to the Relatable Queen Masterclass that I'm hosting on Tuesday, September 21st. This masterclass will change the way you show up on Instagram. I'm helping you discover your unique positioning so that you can show up, cut through the noise on Instagram, and be that beacon of light, the lighthouse for your ideal client. If you feel like your industry is saturated or there's just so many people doing what you do and you're struggling to gain visibility and a dedicated audience, this masterclass is for you. I'll leave the link below to register in the show notes, and it's also on my Instagram at Shameless Promo Coach. Hope to see you there. Hi, welcome back for another episode of the Shameless Promotion Podcast. I have a very special surprise. I have my very first guest. I've never had a guest on this show before, and I'm so excited that my very first guest is Morgan Weemhoff from the Good Space Collective. Hi, Morgan. How you doing?
Hi. Hi, Quinn. So good to be here with you.
I am so excited that we're going to hear all about this. I'm going to just introduce Morgan to y'all because this is a very special treat. I cannot wait for you to hear her story. So Morgan Weemhoff is a certified yoga instructor, a lover of people, and her dog, Leo. The founder of the Good Space Collective, the Good Space Co. is a women's owned business on a mission to cultivate positivity, individuality, wellness, and creativity through curated experiences. Most recently, she hosted the first Good Space Collective at Gordon Green to bring women together for an LA conference style event focused on empowerment, inspiration, and reviving creativity here in our city of Cleveland. So, like I said, this is going to be an incredible conversation. I can't wait to just hear how this all came together. So, my first question is, just the little bitty inkling of an idea of this event. How did that come about? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, well, I'm super excited to be here and honored to be your first guest as well. Quinn is somebody who is super special to the Good Space Collective because she was actually our MC of the event, and she did an amazing job. So really excited to be able to share a little bit of the background of the story. The Good Space Co. was founded about 2 years ago, and it was founded based on kind of a need we were seeing where we wanted women to be able to gather and connect, not just in a yoga class where you go to a yoga class of, 40, sometimes even more people, and then you leave and you don't really ever meet anyone. Or you go to a cooking class and you go with your friend, but you don't really mingle with anyone outside of that group. So we started by creating mini retreats, which was a combination of yoga, wellness. So we would do cooking classes and then also creative design. So we had a graphic designer who would come, Amanda Polio, and she would do all the hands-on creativity. Nicole Ryan would do all the cooking demos, and the three of us created these morning retreats. So it was typically a few hours, and it was just such great outpouring of community and support for women. So we really noticed people putting down their walls. They didn't have their phones up. Weren't trying to, Instagram every moment. They were just there to connect with each other, and they were there to fill up their cup. So it was kind of one of those things that you realize you're filling a need for women, and it just was so invigorating. So the more we hosted those mini retreats, the more we started to dream up, okay, what else would we want to host? And that is really where the collective came in. So we are huge fans of Create and Cultivate and the Yellow Conference, lots of amazing California brands that host these big collectives. And we have been to a few of them, but it typically requires a plane ticket, lots of added expenses to go. So it's really one of those things I view as once or twice in a lifetime. Don't know that I'll be able to go every year. So we started to think, why don't we have something like that in Cleveland? We have so many amazing women here in Cleveland, so many amazing creatives, and there's no reason why you have to fly halfway across the US to go to a conference like that. So
Ah,
this was kind of the nugget that started dreaming up in my head was, why don't we bring something like that here? So we started to, really try to feel out what is the message we want to send? What is the vibe of it? What is the look, the aesthetic, the messaging, everything like that. And that's when we stumbled on Gordon Green. And it was totally, I'm a believer in in God. So I think it was a God moment where we just stumbled on, the Instagram of Gordon Green. Somebody had posted a story of it. And I was like, what is this hidden gem in Cleveland? I've never seen anything like this, just a beautiful, bright, airy space. And for anybody who's been to Gordon Green, you know what I'm talking about.
so beautiful.
So we messaged Jacob, who's one of the owners of Gordon Green, and him and I just hit it off right off the bat. We got on a phone call. I shared with him, here's my vision. Here's kind of the look we want to go for. We want it to be really bright, really fun, all about reviving community in Cleveland because we've been through this year of pandemic where everything's shut down. And Jacob basically said, let's do it. I'm in, I want to support this vision. So we started to build out more and more partnerships. The Beauty Boost was a really big part of co-planning the event as well. So Rachel Kerr, who's the owner of the Beauty Boost, and I started to dream up other things like who would be the keynote speaker and who do we want to be a vendor. So all of these things started to come into play, and the real kind of like, wow, we were making this moment was when Kelsey Elizabeth agreed to be your keynote speaker. For me, that was just a huge dream come true. She's somebody, I love her brand. I love her product. Love how she shows up and just who she is. And when I was on a Zoom call with her, I was kind of trying not to fangirl myself and be like, okay, remain professional. But she's just somebody who's an amazing person in Cleveland. And when she said, yeah, I want to be the keynote speaker, everything felt like it was kind of falling into place.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
And I love this idea of like, sometimes when we story tell, it's like, it started at this and then I did this and I did this. And sometimes it's like hard for people sometimes when they have that really big idea to break it down into knowing like, where do I go with this? So can you tell us when you thought of that big thing, right? Maybe you've been to one of the conferences in LA and you're like, we need to bring this to Cleveland, but it seems like such a big thing to you before you were like, okay, let me go after these partnerships. Who do I talk to? Did you have any moments of like, oh God, like, how am I going to execute on this? Or did you have any, like, how did you create what you were going to actually do? Like your first few steps?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for me, I'm so visual, and everyone's different. Some people like to write, some people like to create visual mood boards. For me, it's kind of a combination of those two. It's the writing and then it's the visual. So I found myself writing, even just in a journal, like what what do I want to serve women with? And it was less about how do I want to make money? How do I want to be seen as successful? It was more like, how can I show up to like really serve a need or like fill women up and make them feel good. And so then I was, writing that down and starting to put together mood boards. And I love PowerPoint. A lot of people don't, but I love PowerPoint and I love Canva. So I started to kind of design like, here's what I'm feeling like, almost like a pitch deck. Here's what I'm kind of feeling is the message I want to convey or what I want to do. And that's what I actually went with to other people. So I shared that with Jacob and I shared that with Rachel from the Beauty Boost. And that kind of helps tell people like your story and your mission statement in a way that they can understand outside of your brain.
I love that. So speaking of like speaking to people about it, was Jacob the very first person you told about it, or who was the very first person you even like mentioned that this might be an idea?
Yeah, it was definitely my roommate Amanda. She's one of my best friends, and she's been my creative partner through all things Good Space. And she and I actually went to the conferences together in Los Angeles. So having somebody who understands not only what you're trying to bring to Cleveland, but who has also been a part of the experience in LA, I think she was the perfect person to say, you want to, like, let's do this. And she was all on board to help me. She did a lot of the stage pieces, and if you saw some of the creative elements to it, she was kind of the person who did graphic design and mood boards. And she just has such a great keen eye for detail, so it was a great person to share with. But you definitely, I will always say this, be careful who you share your baby with, because you will have a lot of people, even early on when I shared my story, who kind of said, I don't think the timing's right. Maybe why are you going to try to push it for this year? You should wait. And I think there was great value in hearing those opinions. But if you're not careful, you'll just kind of give up before you even get started.
Yeah. So she react like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
What about like your family? Because me being there, your family seemed to be such a huge part of it. I remember your mom like coming up to me and talking to me, and me just taking a moment to look at her and be like, wait, are you related to Morgan? Because you guys look so much alike. And she just seemed so proud. And, your fiance was there, your brother was a part of it. Like it was a family affair. So, how
Mhm.
did they react when you first told them the idea?
So it's funny in my family. I don't know if you're big into taking like personality tests or anything like that, but I love taking like Myers-Briggs and personality tests. So in my family, the three of them, there's four of us, the three of them are entertainers and I'm a protagonist. So in the group of the four of us, typically I'm the one who's like a little bit different in an interesting way. Like I love this kind of stuff. I love creating. And when I shared it with my family originally, I think they kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? Or like, what does this even mean? But the thing I love about my family is that they're always on board, whether they understand it or not. They're like, all right, if this is something you want to do, we're gonna come, we're gonna jump in and we're gonna support you. But I really truly don't think they knew what it was until they showed up that day. Because even my mom, she kept coming up to me and being like, this is what, I had no idea this is what you were talking
You was
about. Like,
blown away by it.
yeah. So I think it's hard for people who haven't been a part of the creative world sometimes to understand what it is you're describing, or who haven't attended conferences like that. But then when they see it, it sort of, sparks that in them, like, wow, this is really cool. This is great. And even my brother, like you said, I told him he was promoted. I was like, you're my CTO, my chief technical officer. And he's like, I don't know anything about microphones, but sure, I'll show up and try to help you out. So yeah.
He did a phenomenal job. Thing too, I feel like, is when you do start to tell people about it and they start to get excited about it, it starts to feel more real.
Mhm.
But when you have some dissenting opinions or you have some people who are a little bit discouraging, sometimes I find that it's still out of love, that it's still out of, protecting you and wanting the best for you, and maybe even some fear around what they would and wouldn't do. But seeing it makes believers. So there's just some people who are going to like ride or die with you from the beginning when it's just a baby idea. And there's going to be some people who have to see it first. But I love that you just went with it and you had such like great supportive people on your side. And that leads me to my next question of, so when you were actually like going through the steps, like Jacob said, yes, you were pulling in sponsorships, like partners, speakers were starting to say yes. What was the scariest part about just putting yourself out there, and what kept you going?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think for me, the scariest part is always the unknown. And not so much even the unknown if someone says yes or no. I tend to be, we're all realists that not everyone's going to say yes. And that was definitely the case. There were people I reached out to for sponsorships, or people I reached out to speak, who just said, this isn't the right time for me, or I'm not comfortable with unknowns with COVID. Um, and honestly, that was pretty easy for me to roll with, because I realized, like, you're not going to have 100% success rate. But the hardest part was definitely leading up to the event, when there were so many things changing day by day with COVID, with, just the world in general, and even sensitivity towards what was going on in Afghanistan, and just knowing there were so many women impacted who weren't even able to do half of the things that we're able to do. They weren't able to leave their houses without face coverings. Their rights were being stripped away. And so wanting to kind of put on an event with the right tone, and acknowledging how lucky and how blessed we are to be able to even get together, that was big. And then also just the unknowns of COVID and trying to navigate constant changes, that was also challenging for sure.
Yeah, you addressed that so beautifully during the event of, what it means to gather as women and to have the support of women, and for us to be able to exercise our freedoms in that room together. And I think it really set the tone, and it really wrapped up the conference feeling like, wow, with what I have, like, this is what I can do. And now you've met so many women. And I think you did such a good job at balancing, like, this is time where we're like together and we're learning, or we're hearing stories. And then this is time when we're, communing with each other, and we are, meeting these amazing vendors, and we're having these conversations. And I thought it was such a beautiful balance of the two. And seeing behind the scenes too, like, you guys, Morgan had every single thing timed out so perfectly. And I told Morgan this, she's the most organized person I've ever worked with. Like, I think that's why this event was so magical, and it went off seemingly without a hitch. I know there was things in the background, but like, you had everything down, right? And you were so just like poised, and just like held that responsibility and that space for everybody. And I think that also added to the magic. But I want to hear from you, like, what was so magical about this experience? What came off exactly like what you hoped for? What was more than you ever imagined?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think in terms of the organization, I'll say I am naturally an organized person, but it took an army, like, this whole event. One of my best friends, she is so organized. She's hosted so many events, and she would sit down with me. We probably did this at least 4 or 5 times, and she would go through every detail, and she would ask me questions, and I'd be like, "Oh, here's the plan," and she would say, "Wait, that's confusing. What do you mean by that?" And she challenged me on a ton of stuff. And I actually had to go back and continue to refine and refine and refine, to make sure that when somebody would get my email, or when someone would receive an itinerary, that they would not have a bunch of questions. So that's a huge thing I would say to anybody who's planning an event, is run it past, a group of 5 or so people first, and have them be your first, run through of what confused you, what were you excited about, what were you still wondering, or left with an open-ended question, like what was missing. And then from there, by the time you actually send out your information, it's really, really strong. So that's just a little side note. In terms of what I was super thrilled about, I loved the creative vision that came to life. Like, if you walked into Gordon Green and you saw the look and the feel of the room, it was just, there was no words. It was beautiful.
Breathtaking. Yep.
It was breathtaking. The space, the lighting of that day, it was just like, it was unbelievable. And Pop in Cleveland coming with the balloon arch and doing the whole balloon installation. Blossom Cleveland did a flower installation. Steph from the Cleveland Flea did like a whole stage. And then Last Minute Lavender and Lace, which is a rental company, they came with all of that stage decor. So the rug and the couches. And truly, I think for me, it felt like when you're doing what you're meant to do, the road just kind of opens up, and people were saying yes to things that I would have never even imagined. Like, last minute, I really wanted to give a thank you to some of the speakers, the main speakers. And I went to Kendra Scott and I said, hey, here's what's going on. Here's the event. Would you want to sponsor a thank you for them? And they said, my gosh, we would love to. And they gave me 4 custom necklaces to give out at the
Which
event
I
to the
got.
speakers. Which, yes, Quinn was one of the recipients. But things like that, I think I learned, like, just ask, even when it seems like the answer will probably be no. I was really surprised how many times people said yes. And it was just, yeah, the whole day, I think the look and the feel of it was just amazing.
And something we didn't address that I think is really important is this event sold out fast.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think added to that? Like, what were you expecting that? Like, what happened?
No, I had a full 4-month marketing plan, like detailed marketing plan. And we launched tickets and they sold out in 24 hours. And
Wow.
it was, I mean, I still get goosebumps thinking about it because I was literally standing in my kitchen with Ryan, my fiance, and we were just watching the ticket sales come in and like dancing in the kitchen, being like, oh my God, another ticket, because you put something together and you kind of put like your whole heart into it and you put it out there in the world and you're like, well, here goes nothing, I hope it sells. And then just watching the response from people, I think the big reason, there are a few reasons. I think number one, if you get the right people on board, like for us getting Kelsey Elizabeth and Janae Bryson and Emily Roggenberg, they sell themselves, their character, their businesses, they sell themselves. So when Kelsey posted, I'm the keynote speaker for the Good Space Collective, that was a huge influx of people being like, oh my gosh, I love Kelsey, I'm going to go and buy a ticket. So getting the right people, and then also just the timing of people feeling really isolated. One of the things we really wanted to combat was the feeling of loneliness and women just feeling like they were, they lost their creative kind of inspiration. We wanted to give space for them to dream again and get together after the 1.5 years of just shutdowns and isolation. We wanted to create space for that. And I think that was a huge part of why people wanted to buy a ticket too.
I love that so much. And just being there, it just felt so like all those little moments that you were just talking about, Morgan, like the balloon arch, the flower cart from Blossom. There was a photographer there who like was giving headshots, and that was super fun. All of the amazing vendors. I have never been to an event where I buy so much from vendors. Like you had so many amazing vendors there, and just hearing their stories too. You had the cotton candy there. Just all of it just felt so magical and whimsical and like full of inspiration and vision. And so if you weren't there, you need to be there this year. And she's gonna talk about that in a little bit. The last thing I really want to ask you, like this being Shameless Promo, the podcast, and talking about, putting yourself out there and the magic that can come from it, but the fear that comes from it too. Was there anything that you were like, and you talked a little bit about, changing COVID restrictions in this perfectly timed, curated thing? What just went completely like you didn't expect, and how did you adapt to it?
Oh my gosh, yes. The best piece of advice I just received over the weekend was from a family friend who said, I think it's by Brene Brown, but it says, if you're not willing to step into the arena yourself, you can't give other people criticism.
Yes.
So that has been a kind of a guiding light for me. When people are willing to step out into the arena or do something that is putting themselves out there and say, hey, here's my, feedback, I, with open arms, am always super humbled to receive it. And I think I'm usually one of the first people to say, oh yeah, you're right, I could have done that better, or I wish I would have done something different. But at the same time, when you receive feedback from people who are not stepping in the arena or who are not putting themselves out there, it's a hard lesson to learn that not every feedback can go straight to your heart. Somebody told me once, you hear with your ears, you hear with your mind, and you hear with your heart. So first if you let every piece of feedback goes straight to your heart, which is what I tend to do. If you're a feeler or if you're a people pleaser, it's like, oh my gosh, straight to the heart. But I'm learning to try to hear a little bit more with my ears and with my mind before I let it go straight to cutting through my heart. So I think all in all, are there things I wish I would have done different? Yes, for sure. Next time that I do an event, I'm definitely going to write my closing speech, because when you get up there in a blur, who knows what you'll say. So in hindsight, there's little things like that. But this being our first event, I'm just super grateful with how it all turned out, and I'm very excited for what's next. Not only just for Good Space, but for all the women who made connections at the event. Somebody messaged us the other week and said, who came in on Monday and quit their corporate job. So it's like, who knows, the stories that come out of these kinds of events. And that was our hope for it.
I love that so much. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because you think about what happens in the room, but just to think about what's happening because of being in the room is a whole other ball game.
Yeah, I know. So cool.
That's amazing. And that was a great piece of advice. Before we get into just, giving them all the details about the next one, is there any other nuggets of wisdom or advice or lessons learned that you would give to a fellow creative listening who wants to create this kind of space for women and this belongingness and bringing people together to combat the isolation of the pandemic and just being isolated as a creative and somebody who's, different from the other people they know in general?
Yeah, this is something I'm personally working on. So I'll share kind of what I'm learning right now. It's living from a place of being loved. So I think a lot of times when I'm showing up and I'm hoping that what I'm saying will make other people love me, or I'm hoping that what I'm doing is going to make me loved, there's this striving there, and it's not really living out of a place where I'm already knowing that I'm loved. Like when you're loved and you're worthy and you're enough as you are, you kind of can pour out and live in a really generous and amazing way. But when you're trying really hard to please and to make other people love you, I think that's where the striving kind of comes in. So something I'm working on personally right now and learning, but I guess live loved is my quote right now. So live like you're loved, because you are.
That's so good. I feel like we all needed to hear that. So thank you for that. And then I would love for you to just, talk a little bit about the next event, how they can be a part of it, whether they want to be an attendee or if they want to be a vendor or whatever. How do they find it? How do they get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. So the Good Space 2022 is coming in November. It's going to be at Gordon Green, and we're doing a whole new theme. So this year was revival. It was in summer. It was all about reviving community. Next year is renewal. So it's a little bit of a softer tone. It's going to be goal setting and reflection and intentionality, more workshops, and just a little bit more of a softer kind of reflective feel. So we're really excited because we can, work with different partners. So if you're interested in being a vendor or being a workshop lead or being a speaker, as always, you can reach out to the Good Space CLE on Instagram and just message us. Or if you're interested in being an attendee, the tickets will probably open up in March. So
Awesome.
stay tuned.
Awesome. And I will put all of what Morgan just said in the show notes so that you have, how to find her, how to follow her, and wait for the announcement to buy tickets, because I'm guessing they're going to sell even faster.
Oh my gosh, we can only hope.
And hopefully next year, because it was a huge space, but also, following COVID restrictions, maybe you'll be able to have more capacity. I'm not sure. So, but I'm excited.
Yeah, we're so excited. And just thank you again so much for having me. I have loved getting to know Quinn, and I think she's an amazing human. And not only that, but she has the voice of butter that you could just listen to all day long. So that doesn't hurt when you're picking an MC or a podcast host. But anyways, yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being my very first guest. I loved hearing, I was a part of it, but I loved hearing more about the background of it and how you thought of it and all the pieces coming together. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And I will be at the next one. I'm so excited.
Yay. Well, thank you again.
And there you have it. Thanks for rocking with me this week, but the party doesn't have to end. Come hang out with me and continue the conversation over on Instagram at Shameless Promo Coach. If you enjoyed this episode and feel so led, go ahead and rate and review Shameless Promo if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and make sure that you're subscribed, or follow my podcast over on Spotify. I'll see you next week, same time, same place, with another episode. XOXO, Shameless Promo.